at the Division of Human Services, and I'm still attached to that department, the Division of Human Services. However, I no longer do child protection work. I now do elder care work, which means dealing with vulnerable older persons in our community. Of course, Miss Menville has told you my name, Fadia Andrew. I've been attached to the Division of Human Services for many years, something like 16 years, too long if you ask me. But the work must go on and somebody must do it. So, I'm happy to do what I can. So that's it for me.
Okay, wonderful. So let us start off maybe by just defining for the listening public when we say elderly, at what age or what age range are we looking at?
Okay, so based on the World Health Organization, an older person is a person over 60 years. So when we think about elder care in the context of the Division of Human Services and in the context of my work with older persons, really and truly, I am looking at persons 60 and above. Anybody past the age of 60. I must make the distinction between elderly and an older person. Technically, by the time you hit 45, you are classified as an older person.
Oh, really?
Yes, really.
This
Right?
one this one is new to me.
All
So
right.
you mean I'm almost there?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. However, gone are the days when that was synonymous with being put out to pasture. I mean, we see people living, we have at least um, 25 centenarians currently alive and well. 25 persons at the Division of Human Services is aware of. Persons who are 100 years and over. Just in the neighboring community of Schwezel, we have an older lady who is coming up on 111 years, if you can imagine. So gone are the days when being called an older person, was synonymous with being put out to pasture, with retirement, with giving up on life. We want to reframe that, and that process has started. So it's not something for people to be afraid of. There's no stigma attached to it. It's just a graduation to another level of life, and I think it's something that people should welcome. It's a celebration of having lived past a certain age and moving on to bigger and better things.
Wonderful. So, as you mentioned, people are living quite long, and some of us don't always make it to that age in the best of health, and we need some support. So, I think that might be our entry point into talking about how those situations may pose a risk in terms of elder abuse, and what are some of the other factors that might contribute to an elderly elderly person being abused.
Right. So people are living longer. Yes, that is a fact. There are a lot more services and support available socially and otherwise, in terms of healthcare. A lot of advances have been made that allow persons to live healthier, longer, and more productively. In terms of elder abuse, um, it happens to everybody. I'm not sure how much I missed, but essentially, when we talk about elder abuse, usually people think it's just physical abuse, and that means hitting. But I want to just say to yourself, a city, that elder abuse, older persons, and both older persons and elderly persons suffer the whole spectrum of abuse. That includes financial abuse, and we see that in various forms, not just physical, not just hitting, not just verbal abuse, not just having them tied to the bed or tied to a chair or locked in a room. All of those things are inappropriate, are inhumane, and a violation of the older person's rights. But in addition to that, we have things like elder abuse. Financial abuse, sorry, that's a little bit more sinister, a little bit more subtle, because you have to look. And what does that look like? For example, one of the services that we know about is the welfare assistance for vulnerable older persons. And would you imagine that small allowance is sometimes taken away from those older persons and used for purposes other than what it was really meant to do? So, for example, the allowance currently is $215, although there is a projected increase that's supposed to take effect soon. But $215 going to a vulnerable older person, and then somebody else takes that $200, does not buy the food, does not pay for medication, and takes it to do their own affairs that has nothing to do with the older person. Another thing we're seeing a lot of is abuses in terms of the FIP that's common at our local credit unions. Okay, that FIP, which is a death benefit, we see a lot of persons signing up older persons and then taking those monies for their own benefit instead of using it to provide for burial assistance and provide for burial support. So it's really a sad state of affairs because in many instances, those older persons are not consulted and have no say in whether or not, they want to be part of that business transaction, but their name is submitted, they are enrolled in a program, persons benefit from them, and there's no direct benefit to the older person. Apart from financial abuse, sexual
Can we not
abuse.
move away from financial
Sure.
abuse yet? Because I'm sure there are other elements. We have not touched anything except neglect. So you can go
Right.
through all of them, and a little patwa would be much appreciated.
Of course, absolutely. I love me some patois.
Okay.
Right?
So there's also the issue of older persons who have property.
Absolutely.
Property, and they may not be physically, or they may be a bit physically or mentally impaired or vulnerable, and they are also taken advantage of in terms of the transferring of their property or maybe access to their bank accounts and that sort of thing. So if you could speak a little about that.
Absolutely, Sufre. We see a lot of that happening where older persons are, of course, because of mobility issues, they are not able to go, their property is transferred. Not too long ago, I had a case of an older person. Of course, I'm not going to tell you where our work is confidential, but essentially, one of her children took over the house, promised to renovate that house, and once the house was renovated, basically they broke down the house, gave away all of her belongings, renovated, rebuilt the house, and then she was no longer allowed to access that house. Can you imagine that? She became homeless in every sense of the word. She didn't have keys. She wasn't allowed to stay at the house. All of her belongings, things that she held, um, you know, in high esteem, things that had sentimental value to her were taken away, were destroyed, because, of course, for that younger person, he saw it as garbage, as things that were unnecessary, as clutter. He destroyed it and basically took away all of her ties to her ancestry, to her life, to all of the things that had meaning for her during the process of her life. And that is very unfortunate. But that's just one example. Again, we see persons asking for powers of attorney, forcing older persons into situations where they give them access to bank accounts, like Miss Menville said, and then just abusing that right and using a person's resources for their own benefit. Again, not providing the care, not providing the support. And of course, older persons, because of their physical and mental as well as psychological circumstances, they are very vulnerable. What do I mean by that? I mean, and I hate saying that, but the truth is it becomes very easy. Because think of an older person that's bedridden, Miss Menville. They know that their monies are being used, they are dissatisfied, but who do they go to? How do they access? Many of them don't have a phone, they cannot make a call, or even if they can make a call, there's somebody there listening and censoring the conversations. So they are not at liberty, they do not have that freedom to call for help. They may not be aware of where they can call for help, and they're just not able to act. They do not have that autonomy to go out there and act in their own interest. So they basically find themselves in a situation where they are completely at the mercy of their abuser.
Yes, and sometimes because of fear, they are afraid to speak out because they feel that they may lose whatever little care that they are actually getting.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. That is very real. Like I said, the persons are the ones there caring for them. They overseeing, they hearing, and it impacts everything. Yes, it impacts the ability to act on those situations.
okay, wonderful. So,
Yeah.
in terms of the financial abuse, we've spoken a lot about that. And I would like to touch a little bit on verbal abuse because that is one of the things, the types of abuse that I think we just take it for granted that the things that we say are not actually abuse.
Yes. And that's a big one because, culturally, we have a serious problem as a people, as a community with verbal abuse. We say all manner of things. We do not censor our speech, our language, the way we engage persons, the way we express things, the way we express ourselves, the way we express our frustration. And, it can be very harmful. In fact, I like to think, well, it's not even think. All of the literature suggests that verbal abuse is even more damaging or significantly more damaging than things like physical abuse. Of course, physical abuse is damaging, but the impact of those words on a person's spirit, on a person's psyche, you cannot even assess the level of damage and for how long that would persist in terms of the effects of that. But yes, there is quite a lot of damage. Let me see if I can think of some of the things, we call people mal travail, le ou teni l'argent kote, ou pa ochipe mwen. And of course, these issues are real. These issues are very real. And, I don't just want to speak to the issue as if older persons are just victims. I want to speak about the fact that older people have a responsibility. In fact, that's why I brought up the concept of older persons. From 45, you become or you graduate into the category of an older person. And I want to encourage everybody who's listening, everybody who's out there, to plan for your retirement, plan for your older years, plan for that stage of your life, build relationships, foster good relationships with your family, with your children, with your neighbors, people in your circle, so that you can have that support because that is so tremendous. A lot of the abuse that we're seeing now, and I'm not saying that's an excuse, I just want persons to understand that it is a direct spill off or direct consequence of the decisions persons would have made it at an earlier stage. For example, Miss Menville, we all know the stories of um many Caribbean men, nou sa nou ka kouye yo sparrow, jan sou fouye, nou ka kouye yo se sparrow, yo ni ish pa la, yo pa ou chipe pièce. And then these men are now older, they're 70 something, they're 80 something, they're no longer able to earn a salary. And although they have 12 children or 8 children, nobody really looks after them because they do not feel that level of commitment or
They
responsibility
don't
for
have
them.
that bond. So the
Exactly.
bond that we talk about and building those relationships, it starts very early, and it's
Exactly.
once it is there, it's a bit difficult to just do away with. If you
Absolutely.
continue to nurture it, then it will be there to your benefit in the older years.
Exactly. And it's beyond bonds, of course. You want to nurture good relationships, but you also want to put a little something aside. Create a base that at least will cushion you to some extent. So even if, as you move into your older years, things are not as good as you'd like them, you're not as comfortable, at least you have something to start with. You've created a little base for yourself that allows you some of the basic comforts and the basic necessities so that you can assist yourself to some extent and you're not, left at somebody else's mercy.
Okay. Now, one of the things I know that always comes up is that people would rebut that by saying, by how when me pas ça même vivre à présent, na mette l'argent pour l'argent tout.
Bagay wed sa vwe, bagay wed, me just imagine it. pli an pli bagay ka vini pli wed. So, no matter ki kantite wed bagay wed, nou ni pou sewe, menm si se an chlen, ou be an 50 cents, because se pou toujou ka chile, se pou sewe an bay pou deme, because ou pa sav sak ka vini. So, si ou ni $5, même si vous dépensez 4, même si vous dépensez 450, ou ka sewe an ti 50 cents. Ek ti 50 cents sa, kon nou ka di se piti ki ka fe go. Ou ka sote pou we, an 5 l'année, an 10 l'année, ki sa 50 cents sa, sa fe ba ou. An lot bagay, nou ka encourager moun peche, farmers, moun ki ka travay bay koyo, pou fè kontribisyon NIC ou, fè kontribisyon. So, le ou retire, le ou pa sa travay anko, ou ni se ti benefis sa. Sou tombe malade, ou ni an ti benefis pou sipote ou pou sipote fami ou. So, tout fosman pa kay aso, ou sa, pou kay sa soulaje ko ti miyet, ek ede situasyon ti miyet.
As the older people used to say, c'est pour ça acheter premier chandelle là.
Exactement.
All right. So if we live by that, then I think it would be a little easier for us to see the relevance of putting away a little. It may not take care of everything, but it would certainly help.
Right. But I want to go back to the issue of verbal abuse, and I want to just encourage persons out there, listeners. You know, as a young girl, we heard many of those old sayings, do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. Nou tout ka vini gwan, nou pièce pa ka wete jen. Jou an jou, chaque jou ki pase, nou ka vini pli gwan. L'âge ka antwe. So, jodi a se sa an moun, deme se sa nou. Sa ou pare kotan pou kou pa fe an lot mouni. So, twete moun, manye ou kay avudwe, yishu obe lot moun twete ou. Even the caregivers out there, sometimes I know they get very frustrated. They turn people away. It's difficult with the cases of persons who have dementia, who present with somewhat challenge. But we have to exercise that level of patience, that level of professionalism in our approach and in our treatment. Even our healthcare professionals, sometimes family members, sometimes the way that we engage older persons, the things that we say, the way that we speak to them, it is really very inappropriate and harmful to them psychologically and otherwise.
Indeed. And I'm happy that you brought up the case of caregivers, not necessarily just the paid caregivers, but you find that many times it's family members who are actually the caregivers. And because they themselves are usually under so much stress, and also factoring in the type of relationship they may have had during their younger years with that older person that they are now caring for, all of these contribute to sometimes, a volatile sort of situation within a home that could very easily lead to verbal abuse and even physical abuse. Now, when we talk about physical abuse, we tend to think that it's actually probably taking a belt and giving somebody 10 strokes and all of that. But it includes some very simple things like...
Yes, like grabbing, pushing, shoving, holding the person very roughly, handling them very roughly in the shower, the way you bathe them, the way you scrub them, the way you shove them, even on the bed while they're lying. Some older persons who are bedridden, the way we move them sometimes, because we are already angry, the level of force and the degree of force is way too much. It's excessive, and all of those things can be categorized. Not can be. All of those things are classified as physical abuse. And you said something earlier. I want to go back to the issue of the resentment that some family members feel. So, yes, they're there. Yes, they're caring, but there's a high level of resentment and bitterness, and the relationship becomes very volatile and prone to being abusive. And one of the things that I want to say to the listeners out there is that one of the best strategies for dealing with elder abuse is for entire families and communities to get involved. Why do I say that, Sofre? Because many hands make light work. If many people are involved, if persons can take that psychological break, if persons can have a little opportunity to just release some of that stress, take a break. One of the things that we do, many people like to look at carers of older persons and we judge them. We say, eh, upawe, ini madam like a maltwete. But what are we doing to alleviate? Once we recognize that there's a situation that's volatile, there's a situation that is bothering on being abusive, we need to ask ourselves, and Miss Manville made a very important point, is that person stressed? Is that responsibility becoming too much for that sole caregiver, that sole family member? And what can we do? Very often we do not ask that question. We like to judge, we cast aspersions, we add stress by labeling and criticizing. But rather than do that, Sufra, I want to challenge you to be part of the solution and to engage other family members. This person must be stressed. Maybe they need a weekend off. Maybe they just need a couple hours off. So volunteer and say, you know what, Janet? And I'm not talking about any particular Janet, just a random name that came to mind. You know what, Janet? This afternoon, I'll take care of mama. This afternoon, take a break, get dressed, go to the beach, do anything you want to do for the next 5 hours. That's your time. Take the day off. I will handle this older person. And this is what we need to do. If everybody pitches in, if family members develop a system where they can support each other and support our older persons, then the responsibility would be a lot easier to bear.
Exactly. Now, I've been asked, since you spoke about others pitching in, usually when I get asked about, so if you notice the neighbor ill treating an elderly person, is there somewhere I can call? As it is as though the mindset is to report instead of helping. So I'm very happy that you mentioned that yes, you can offer to help. You can go across whether the person is a family member or not, go across and ask, is there something I can do to help you? Do you need me to sweep the yard? So it's one less responsibility for the caregiver.
Absolutely. And sometimes it can be something as simple as saying, you know what, don't bother to cook for mom today. Today I'm making soup. I will send mom a meal today at lunchtime. I will send her, I'm making bouillon. I'm going to send mom her lunch today. So you don't have to worry to cook for her. You don't have to worry to cook. I will handle that today. Just having one less thing to do, because caring for an older person is a tremendous responsibility. Now, that does not mean that we shouldn't report. I want to be very clear and very direct. Reporting is important to safeguard that older person. Sometimes that has to be part of the process. And reporting is not intended, well, it should not be intended to be punitive. In other words, if you are reporting to be part of the solution, to get help, to get an intervention that is meaningful, absolutely, that's what the motivation to should be. So in addition to offering help, you can report and you should report, right? So that the services and the agents that are available to provide that support can engage that family, can engage that older person, and mobilize other resources that can provide support. What do I mean? More specifically, so yes, you go in and you help. But if you call human services, for example, or you call the police, or you call the Ministry of Health, you call SSDF, the home care program, and you report, they can then say, okay, let us engage this family, let us engage this older person. We were not aware. And that's something I want to say to you, Sufre. Sometimes the agencies are not aware. So that's where reporting comes in. Because once you report, you make the system aware and then something can be done. Sometimes maybe these persons are struggling financially. Maybe we can make welfare assistance available. So there's nothing wrong in reporting. There's absolutely nothing wrong in reporting. I encourage it, but it has to be done with the view of supporting that family rather than casting aspersions and adding stress to an already very delicate situation.
Okay, so since we're on the topic of reporting, is there a specific agency that they should reach out to? And do you, by any chance, have the contact information
Okay, so
available?
currently, the Division of Human Services is the agency that provides that support. I want to be very clear, it's a small unit. There are only two persons. However, I must tell you that I am extremely proud of the work that that unit has done. They've worked assiduously. We've done a tremendous amount of work. We've touched many, many lives, and we are available to our St. Lucian public. The numbers, I'm going to give you cell numbers because somehow that's always easier for persons. The Elder Care Unit, Division of Human Services, you can reach the officers attached to that unit at 724-7122. I repeat, 724-7122 or 724-8035. 724-8035 in the south. We also have landlines, 454-8802 for the south, 454-8802 for the south, and 468-5373 in the north. 468-5373 in the north of the island. Um, Unfortunately, it's a small unit. However, I can tell you, and I'm sure those of you who've been listening, you know that there are plans to um, create an elder care department that is already in the works. A lot of the groundwork has been done. Um, that unit is attached to the Ministry of Health, of course, Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs. Many of you would recognize the change in that whole portfolio to include elderly affairs. That's a great move for St. Lucia. I want to applaud the government in making that move, and I look forward to a better, more fully staffed, more well established program for older persons that can provide the support they actually need. Now, that doesn't mean it's only human services, Miss Menfield. There are other agencies. However, as it relates to specific cases of intervening in cases of abuse, cases of neglect, cases of abandonment, human services would be the most direct agency. And then, of course, we provide linkages to other agencies like the home care program, the welfare department, and others. If there's need for residential support, we would help the family access that and those kinds of things.
Wonderful. Now, I just need you to break down the north south boundary for us, please.
Right. So, you know how we say during COVID, we used to say 758 and 759.
759.
Right. So the southern boundary extends from Dennery to Soufrière and from Soufrière to Dennery on the upper end. So it's Dennery to Soufrière, Dennery to Soufrière. So from Grand Riviere, Dennery to Soufrière proper, and from Soufrière, well, I'm guessing from Colombette up, of course, from Colombette all the way up to Grand Riviere, Dennery as well. That would be the demarcation as far as north and south.
Okay, wonderful. So we know when I like us to have the details so that people know exactly where to call. Sometimes people want to call, then they get frustrated and all of that because they're not getting to the right people. You said there were only two of you, so that means that you work from Sufer to Dennery
Absolutely.
all alone.
All alone.
Oh my
It's an
goodness.
unfortunate situation, but it is what it is. Yes.
And in that area, would you say that there are many elderly people who are experiencing neglect?
Yes, Sofre. I must tell you, when I first started doing this work about 4.5 years ago, it took me by storm. I think the issues of elder abuse and elder neglect are still very much hidden. I don't know if it's quite hidden or if it is that we're just in denial. Because I can tell you, Sofre, like I said, it took me by storm. I never thought this problem was so huge in our small island. But the issues of elder abuse are tremendous. They are disproportionate because these issues are there and we continue to turn a blind eye to it, Sufre. If you think about it right now, if I ask each person who's listening to pause, Miss Menville,
Mhm.
I am sure that every single person can think of at least one older person they know who is receiving less than comfortable. I'm not saying ideal, less than comfortable care in terms of their nutrition, their healthcare, their housing, the socialization, and all of those things.
Can you break it down for us? Because sometimes we know of situations, people know of situations, and maybe they think it's normal, when in fact, these are the cases of neglect that you are speaking about. So, in
Well,
terms of maybe the medical care, the nutrition, the personal hygiene, the care of the home, that sort of thing.
right. So, so Freya, I don't think it is that we don't know. I think it's easier to just blank it out because we do not want to, many of us do not want to focus on those issues. We do not want to direct our attention because of the discomfort that it would create within our own spirit, right? But the truth is, let me give you an example of a case that I know. I mean, it's a case that has shaken me. Like I said, this work has moved me in ways that I never imagined. I know of this older gentleman. He's blind, he's deaf, his right leg is amputated. He has high blood pressure and diabetes, and he lives alone in a house. So, Frey, he lives alone. A social St. Lucia social assistant home caregiver goes in during the day for a couple hours, but once that caregiver leaves at 2 o'clock, this gentleman is left alone until 9 o'clock the next day when that caregiver returns. Now, are you telling me that we do not know that that is ideal, Sofre? Of course we know. That is far from ideal. That amounts to abandonment for a vast part of the day. And we all know the dangers and the issues of night care. As we say, le ou malade, se le ou swe ou ka senti mal. Le ou malade, se le ou swe, how do you say, pain, mal ka deklawe ou, right? Se le sa la mal la ka pli gwa, vi ka pli fo. So just imagine, Sufre, from 2 o'clock, this blind, deaf gentleman with just one leg, his left leg, he has nobody to call for a cup of water. He has nobody to call for assistance if he makes a mess. He has nobody to call if he's feeling unwell. Can you imagine? These are the kinds, and we have so many of those cases. It's just scary. People who are just alone, abandoned, neglected, living in broken down houses where the wall can come down on them at any time, who are living without basic medical care. So we know they are sick, but they cannot access the healthcare because they cannot walk to the health center. They cannot hire a bus to take them to the hospital. Most likely, the nurse aide is not even aware that this person is sick because they have nobody to speak or advocate on their behalf. So these persons are just there. I remember a case just a few years ago, about 2, 3 years ago, of a gentleman who was sick in a house, basically living on a mattress. He was living on that mattress. He couldn't get up. He was cooking on that mattress, next to the mattress. I mean, even if I try to describe it to you, Sufra, you cannot imagine. He was literally lighting fire next to that mattress because he could not get up, he could not move. So, whatever he could get, whoever would drop something for him occasionally, sometimes it was just 2 sweet potatoes. He tried to cook it right there next to the mattress. He has to mess right there, cook right there, do everything right there. And these are the kinds of situations that people are actually living in our communities, Sufre. It's real, it is there. It may be your neighbor, it may be somebody 2 houses down the street, it may be somebody up the hill from you, but we have to start being each other's keeper and start taking a real close look at what is happening in our communities, right there in our faces. It's happening.
And I imagine that most of those people have children or family members living at least in St. Lucia, because nowhere in St. Lucia is too far for us to go, at least
Exactly.
occasionally.
And it's unfortunate, Miss Menville, because a lot of what we are seeing these days is that if an older person doesn't have any material resources, then persons are not inclined to assist. It's sad. It is really, really heartbreaking But that is the reality that we are faced with. And that's why I encourage older persons to create that little cushion in for themselves, to put away that little 5 cents, that little 50 cents, to create something for yourself. Work with the view that you don't know what is coming to the future. Don't just spend your money wildly. Put aside something, even if it's a little shack you can build now, so that in your old age you have a place to sleep, so that you're not getting wet, you're not exposed to the heat and to the elements. Do it now. Do not wait for when you cannot do it again and then you add somebody's mercy.
And I think that is good advice for the very young. As soon as you begin to work, you should start looking at those things because, as you said in the very beginning, there are a lot of diseases, especially the chronic non communicable diseases that are affecting us, and we never know how badly we may be affected personally by
Exactly.
them, that at 45 years old you may be unable to work.
Exactly.
But if
Exactly.
you started working at 20 and you put aside a little something, you have a little cushion to help you.
Right. And then, many of us think, okay, ish man kay pon ke mo fe this ish, mo fe you it ish. But the reality also
I think the
is
reality is hitting a lot of people because we
exactly.
see so many
We
cases
see
of people with so many
so many
children.
children and everybody reneges. That moral fiber, that socialization that we had, that sense of commitment, of responsibility for our family members, for your mother, for your father, for your older persons. We see a lot of that being watered down, so people no longer feel that sense of responsibility, of commitment, and it somehow seems to be easier for persons to turn a blind eye, especially if they
And
have
depend
moved
on
away.
government, as
Exactly.
we see.
And then they call on government a lot. Sa gouvernement ka fe, sa gouvernement. Of course, gouvernement ni an
Mm-hmm.
responsabilite pou provide social assistance,
Assistance.
assistance social. Gouvernement ni an responsabilite pou sipote moun an vieyes yo, sa ki pa ni, sa ki pa sa afford, me osi nou ni pou sipote kon nou ek fami ni pou sipote yon alot.
Lot.
Paske si se moun sa la se fondasyon la vi nou. San yo, nou pa ka wive gwande a nou. Yan chay moun kwe yo jos wive, yo jos etabli la vi, yo jos etabli, yo ni go travay, yo ni go machin, yo ni go kay, epi se gwan moun an ki yo chi pe yo. La yo te mamay, la yo te piti an jenes yo. Actuellement, kay yo tro bel, ches yo tro bel, se moun sa la, pitet ni an ti lode pisan, an ti lode fiksyon, an ti lode la swe, yo pa bien ben dejou, ek yo pa vle se moun sa an se bel kay yo a dan se bel machin yo a. Me, sans...
Mm.
Exactement. Exactement.
And sometimes they trivialize the help that was given to them when they were
Exactly.
younger. So then it relieves them of the responsibility of assisting.
Exactly. Exactly. I read something just yesterday, I think. Since excuses were created, nobody's wrong, and nobody has to take responsibility because everybody has an excuse and everybody finds a way to rationalize it. But there's still basic right and wrong. There's still basic responsibility that we have. There's still basic understanding and appreciation that we didn't get to where we are now without some effort, some investment, as small as it was. These
Some
people, some
sacrifice.
sacrifice, exactly. These people, I mean, I love to engage with the older persons, Miss Menville. I hear stories about how they used to walk long distances
Oh,
to
yes.
sell volant, to sell
Mm.
sardine, dig up their dashing, carry their breadfruit on their head, go, ay koupe bois, fè chèrbon, ek marché, le yo sotan chèrbon ki le, yo ni pou ay gare pou debois pen pou boui, le size se le gam dine, because that's the time they get the thing, the food or the fish or whatever they get, ti sa lezon, pou yo fè an ti bagay pou yo bay mamay. Ek oui, sa se ten la vi ki wed, me poyan se sa, yo pa jeme give up an lè nou, yo pa jeme
Mhm.
neglije nou. Adam moun neglije, makadi non, me an chay moun tui, me ek ish yo sipote, ek actuellement an chay se mamay sa la ka oubliye kantite tui me, le pa wan tui me ek yo pou mene yo laj la yo e ya.
Exactly. And I think we need to remember all of these things so that when we have to care for those people, those elderly people who are not always, I like to tell people, elderly people are not always very nice.
Yes.
They get to an age where they say anything. Yes.
Yes.
And sometimes even without the senility,
Yes.
they just
Yes.
become, I don't know, they say anything, they they will respond in ways that are not.
Harsh and
Yes.
inappropriate. But part of it is understanding the psychology of the older person as well. Because we have to remember that these people are dealing with a lot of loss of their independence.
And fears.
Exactly. Loss of their independence, fear, a lot of anxiety about what is to
Mm-hmm.
come. They do not like being at people's mercy. They do not like not being able to move, not being able to earn their own money. Sometimes they have regrets about their lives and they don't know how to deal with it. They regret the decisions that they made. They are not happy with where they are now. There are things they should have done, they could have done that they didn't do. They are reflecting. Some of them are afraid of death. They're afraid of
Mm-hmm.
dying. They're afraid of being sick. Some of them are sick and afraid of the diagnosis from the doctor. So they are humans. And I think sometimes we forget older people are human beings just like us. They have the same fears, the same anxieties, the same feelings. They carry some of the same hurt. Sometimes, they do not like the way they're being treated, or sometimes they're disappointed. Sometimes the person they spent all their monies on or they invested in, they realize in their old age when they're sick, these people do not care for them. They've turned their backs on them. So there's a lot of hurt attached to that as well. So they're also dealing with a lot of issues that we have to take into consideration in dealing with them and in processing their own behavior.
Exactly. Very well said. And I think we have come to the end of the program. So I'm just going to ask you if there's anything. I really enjoyed having you. I really, really
I enjoyed
enjoyed it.
being here.
I love the examples. It helps people to actually understand what we mean when we talk about elder abuse. So, if there's anything that you would like to add before we close off, I will just
Well,
allow you to go
yes.
ahead and say.
Yes. In closing, Sofra, I just want to remind us that elder abuse is real. It is real. It is out there. It's happening every day and it's happening all around us. And I want to tell you, I made an error, but I'm going to be quick to correct it before I leave. This week on June 15th, it's World Elder Abuse
Abuse.
Awareness Day. And that's part of the reason why we're here today. So, although there's Elder Abuse Awareness Day, we call it WEAD for short, and you can Google it, you can check it out, you can read up on it. There's lots of information online. I'm sure are going to be lots of programs and activities this week that you can listen in on and learn from and call to ask your questions and clarify issues. Um, the reality is that it's not something that we should focus on for just one day because it's very real. Our population, a large percentage of our population is older persons. I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but we have an aging population. We have a lot more older persons than we have children and middle age. So if you look at the population chart, we have a top heavy kind of chart, right? And what that means is we need to take our responsibility to our older persons very seriously. When I was a child, I used to hear that a community raises a child. That is the ideal when a community can raise a child. And I want to challenge you, Sufre, that it also takes a community to care for our older persons. Government has its role, the corporate community has its role, families, neighbors, friends, every person has their role. And I want to encourage us to each of us take our role seriously. If you see something happening, don't just say sa pa za fe mwen, sa pa nan yon pou fe ek mwen, yo kay we pou ko yo la, yo pou pe la. No, that attitude is not good enough. Sometimes, like I said earlier, persons are not aware of the resources. So make a call. You don't have to give your name. You can make an anonymous report, an anonymous contribution. Say, listen, I think there's something happening in that house down the road. There's an older person there. I can hear her crying at nights, or I hear she's being tied up all day, every day until the next day, or she's locked in a room. Make a call so that the persons who have the skills can go in and engage and alleviate, provide some possible solutions, because any little step can have a domino effect. A little can go a long way. In addition to reporting, anything that you can do to support that person, do it. Whether it's a packet of diapers, whether it's a box of juice, whether it is providing a meal or offering an hour of your time to sit with that older person so that the other person can maybe just go to the hairdresser and wash their hair and be pampered for an hour. You'd be amazed how much that can do. Just having that time to go for a sea bath or to go and get their hair washed and pampered for a little while, how that can alleviate. By the time that person comes back, they're feeling lighter, they're feeling rejuvenated, refreshed, renewed, and that will help the situation. So let us work together, Sufre, to do what we can to support our older persons. That's what I want to leave you with today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us, Fadia. Ulan, I think you will agree. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, very well done. And I hope that all of our listeners took it in and understood. Yes, acknowledge that it is something that is affecting a lot of people in St. Lucia, and we ourselves, there are things that we can do to reduce the
Absolutely.
risk of it happening as we get older.
Because we are moving into that stage of our lives.
Now, believe it or not, it might not be you, me, but somebody out there is going through it. Somebody's a victim of circumstances.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Anyway, again, I just want to thank you for coming in. I know your schedule is always busy, but you had to manage time to make time to be here.
Absolutely.
Again,
And we really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. and my only regret is that we didn't have time to take some callers. I hope we will get another opportunity and that the callers will call in and share their thoughts with us at the next time.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Casualty 911, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. with the consultant.